Welcome to the 700 Club. So potent that the equivalent of a couple of grains of sand can kill you? Well, what is it? It's called fentanyl. It's 100 times more powerful than morphine, and it's the main culprit behind a soaring epidemic of deaths. 100,000 of these overdoses. And that's even worse. This particular problem is going to be in almost every drug on the market, and it's added secretly. Well, what can you do to protect yourself from this hidden killer? CBN medical reporter Laurie Johnson has the explanation.
In 2020, as Americans suffered through pandemic shutdowns, 93,000 people died of drug overdoses, by far the worst year on record. That's about 250 deaths each day, or roughly 11 every hour. The main culprit, fentanyl, often secretly added to other drugs, catching the user off guard.
It's really just in everything, in the drug market. It's kind of a scary time.
The Virginia Medical Examiner's Office says 3/4 of overdose deaths involved fentanyl, almost all accidental.
This whole drug overdose epidemic has changed, but it's increasing significantly in the last year, and I'm not sure if we're going to really see anything slow down in the near future.
A synthetic opioid, fentanyl, is 100 times more powerful than morphine, so potent that the equivalent of a couple grains of sand can kill.
It is cheaper than many other substances, so it can be added to stretch out. If somebody has a certain amount of cocaine, for instance, if they add fentanyl, they can increase the volume at a very low cost.
It's also added to pills like Xanax, oxycodone, and Molly.
How easy is it to spot fake pills that are bought on the street?
Almost impossible. What we call a pill press is what dealers are using to take the powdered substance and turn it back into a prescription-looking pill. Are incredibly sophisticated.
In addition to the fentanyl-laced street drugs, pandemic closures of rehab centers also contributed to the high number of overdoses as recovering addicts relapsed.
Then they were alone. And that isolation is the worst thing to happen for someone who struggles with substance abuse.
Some drug prevention organizations are taking action to stop future overdoses by giving known users two things: fentanyl test strips to detect the substance in other drugs, and Narcan, the opioid reversal spray. While users are also advised to use the buddy system, the #1 recommendation remains get treatment.
But we've seen a lot of people get better. Mostly, and I have to be honest with you, it's through the power of Christ. When they give their life to the Lord and they say, look, God, I'm surrendering my life to you. I call it submitting to the process.
He recommends the 12-step program, which involves believing God can break the chains of addiction.
Well, Laurie's here with more. Laurie, this isn't something we're familiar with. Well, how did it suddenly just burst on the scene, or is that a true statement?
It's been on the scene since about 2013. Some people may remember the rock star Prince. He died of a fentanyl overdose. He thought he was taking Vicodin. He had a pain problem, but it actually had fentanyl in it. A number of years ago on this program, you may remember Eric Bolling, who used to be a Fox News analyst and was on the 5. His son also died of a fentanyl overdose accidentally when he was in college. He thought he was taking one of these party drugs, ecstasy, Molly, and it actually had fentanyl in it. So it's been around for a while, but the problem is getting worse, Pat, much, much worse.
Is this something the Chinese are doing, something the Russians are? I mean, is there any source of this stuff?
The source is China, and it's synthetic, and so the United States government talked to the Chinese government and had these new restrictions outlawing the export of fentanyl from China, but now now what's happening is these suppliers are not exporting fentanyl. They're exporting the actual raw ingredients to places like Mexico, and the cartels get the raw ingredients and then make the fentanyl there and then bring it to the United States through the southern border.
It looks like a drug dealer. Why would he want to kill his customers? It doesn't make any sense.
That's a great question. A lot of drug dealers don't even know how much fentanyl or whether there's any fentanyl in their drugs at all. Sometimes even the drug dealers are caught off guard.
Well, now you're talking about the equivalent of 2 grains of sand. This stuff will kill you. It's more deadly, 100 times more deadly than cocaine.
Much more deadly than morphine, hundreds of times more deadly than even heroin. And so what's so troubling about this is a lot of people are buying drugs on the street, like pills and cocaine or some of these party drugs I talked about, and they have no idea that there's fentanyl in it. And so even some people think that they may have drugs with just a little bit of fentanyl in it, which some people want, but there actually is enough to kill you.
Why would somebody want it if it's the killer? I mean, does it enhance a high?
Exactly. It is a great feeling. It's an opioid, and opioids dull the senses. We know that painkillers are opioids, so they diminish pain, but not just physical pain, Pat, emotional pain as well. Yeah. So it gives you that euphoric feeling. So yes, it's a very good high, so to speak. It makes you feel so great. And so some people like that. It actually makes their drugs a little bit better.
100,000 deaths. That's the most shocking thing. Now, you have some ways of telling whether something is fair. What's that you got with you?
So want to reemphasize that people should stop taking any kind of drugs that they buy on the street, whether it's pills, cocaine, whatever. But obviously, some people are still going to use and are afraid that there might be fentanyl in the street drug that they're using. These are called fentanyl test strips. Mm-hmm. Police are giving these out to known drug users. Let's say police show up to a place where someone has overdosed and is still alive. They will give these and say, you know, next time you use your drug, you can test whether there is fentanyl in it. You take the drug and add a little water to it, and then just stick this test strip in the substance, and wait for about 15 minutes, and it'll tell you on this test strips whether the drug contains fentanyl. Now, it doesn't tell you how much fentanyl is in it, but it will tell you the presence. I got these test strips online. There are a couple places you can buy them, and those places are on our website, cbnnews.com, if people are interested in purchasing these. Now, this is Narcan. Yeah. This is what the police use when they show up to an overdose, and it's something that is now available at drugstores. You do not need a prescription. I bought this at my drugstore for $40. There are 2 of them in. If you know somebody is actually overdosing, you can squirt this up their nose, and it stops the overdose.
Wow.
And so now this is available to the general public.
And spray it.
That's right. And so people who, for example, sadly, very many parents or grandparents may live with someone who they know is using, and they're afraid that they're going to die. Or, you know, people who are drug users, the buddy system. This is nice to have on hand. Again, we're not advocating that people use illegal drugs. We know that some people will, and this is the way to prevent dying.
I understand that down on the border they have gotten several pounds of fentanyl. I mean, the cartels are using it.
Absolutely. It's so cheap, and it's so readily available, and it is so easy to transport into the United States that the demand is very, very high, and the Customs and Border Patrol are seizing the most fentanyl ever before in this year. So it's not slowing down at all.
Boy, it's horrible. Ladies and gentlemen, you see, we're under assault. Our children are under assault, but this is horrible. This is a killer. I have been weighing against the Sackler family who have to pay billions of dollars. They got people hooked on all these painkillers, Oxycontin and Oxycodone and so forth. But to add a killer to it is beyond belief. This is so terrible.
It really is, and there are a lot of good people who have become addicted to these painkillers when they had an injury, and then the drug, or rather their doctor will no longer prescribe this painkiller to them. So these people get hooked on these painkillers rather innocently, and when their supply runs out from their doctor, then they go to the street to try to buy these drugs, and now sometimes fentanyl is in them and they die.
Ladies and gentlemen, the big thing is turn to the Lord and be careful what you put into your body. It's really awful. Wendy, thank you. Gloria, thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have a confession. I was at a skeet range in Hot Springs, Virginia, and the guy who was shooting was missing stuff. And I turned to the woman next to me who happened to be sitting there, and I said, you know, what's the deal? He said, well, he's a national champion. He's just trying a new gun. And he says, you put on the best demonstration of shooting that I have ever seen. And I said, what is that? She said, you didn't hit anything. So I thought, am I a quick shot or what have you? All right.